welcome to this panel where we're going to be looking at the newest tech that's proved to be the most useful over the last 12 months or so. With me are John Murphy, Creative Director Motion at BBC Sport, and Brian Leonard. He is Head of Engineering, Production and Workflows at IMG Studios. Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for being with us. John, I'm going to start with you. Okay. That initial question really, when you look back over what you've achieved over the last 12 months, what bit of tech for you has been the one that stood out and the one that's made your life enhanced, easier, whatever?
Yeah, it's interesting. Firstly, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's interesting just on the last panel, obviously mentioned the kind of Tokyo Olympics that we did and virtual and that. I mean, I think, so just to kind of, the last year, obviously very important, but kind of just to go back a little bit, as you know, we started looking at virtual studios with the kind of implementation with gaming engines, 2017, 2018. We went green screen for Match of the Day, which was a big change for us. We only did that because of the gaming engine technology, because it finally brought something that was, that realism, that kind of. So that was the start of the journey. And then obviously I think what then kind of elevated it more was the Tokyo Olympics. The story behind Tokyo Olympics is that we were actually going to be doing that green screen studio in Tokyo, in the IBC. The reason for that was because we didn't feel that we had a kind of a presentation backdrop in Tokyo for our real set, so we were going to do the virtual scene. Now, because of COVID, obviously we kind of just effectively the same plan, brought the green screen back to Dock 10 in Media City, did it from there, and actually as a business case, actually probably worked better because we had all the kind of conversations about you're in Manchester but you're able to kind of deliver Tokyo. So that was a really big one for us, and it was the first time we kind of we made a lot of mistakes with virtual at the beginning, not quite knowing kind of when to stop, how far to go, things like the costs, because things can develop a lot. So it was a bit of a journey for us, but for Tokyo, I think it was the first time we kind of went, we're in a virtual, we've got all this technology, gaming engines, let's kind of think outside the box. Let's not just put ourselves in a studio, because we can all do that. So that's why we kind of went on top of a building in Tokyo with and all that. So that was great. And then obviously the Winter Olympics was then a follow-on from that, because the summer games and the winter games were really close together, which doesn't usually happen. And we had built an 84 meter squared green screen studio in our own office building in Media City. And that was a very kind of, it's back of an office, effectively. Yeah. And we've been doing small presentations from there, kind of Masters golf highlights and everything else, and putting an image as the backdrop, and just kind of, and then for the Winter Olympics, we effectively we decided to build a ski resort.
As you do.
As you do.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, I'm going to ask them, interrupt you very slightly, but there is a reason for it. It's because you've actually sent us some, a VT of what you did behind the scenes, and we're going to just run it. It's not going to have any sound. We'll run it behind us so you can see what John's actually talking about.
So so this, obviously from Media City. So again, it's an 84 meter squared box, and we decided why we've got the green screen, we've got the virtual. So we gave ourselves kind of 6-7 different presenting positions, because you have a one seated position, and then we had some green cubes to the right, where that when we're on an event, we were able to cut back and be in a completely different place in the ski resort, if you like. Now the reason for this, I think, the technology, this is kind of taking it on for us, because it's very much an internal model, and what we as a business case, this is the kind of thing that I think really works now. You've got your own space, small space, as I say, back of an office, and now that that's there, what it is then is that if you've done another event or whatever, it's changing the creative. It's changing the creative of it. So, the winters has a bit more fun around it than the summer games and everything else. We had virtual wildlife, and all kinds of crazy things going on. But it just kind of, as I say, as a business case, it just really kind of showed that in a small space going forward, you can change. If you want something more serious, you can kind of go to a more kind of creatively serious model, or something a bit more fun. So anyway, that's so. When you say past year, that's a bit of a. Yeah. We've had a run up to it. but the virtual
It's playing in your
the
virtual
virtual
studio.
presentation of everything has been the real kind of kick on for us. You know, and as I say, you know, at the moment, obviously we're doing the World Cup, it's in Qatar, we're not doing anything VR AR because different events have different reasons, different that you can't always do it. But certainly sustainability and remote production and everything else, the virtual space has become big for us.
Talk more about that in a moment. Let's bring in Brian. I don't think you're going to talk about virtual studios, are you? What for you has been the tech? Because the whole idea of this session was for it could be all singing or dancing tech, or it could be something quite small that's made a massive difference that people might not necessarily know about.
I'd love to have exciting stories that, you know, have green screen studios and doing huge events like that. I think we're still at the situation of the pandemic has had a huge effect. And I feel like we're just coming out of it now because there's an element of, I think the appetite there is raging to do stuff right at this moment in time. So as an example, silly things we're doing, and I say they're silly, but they've got real life cases, is we've been looking at using technology. So there's a huge shortage of engineers in the industry. So when it comes to sound engineers, we've realized that we've got a problem. If we want to expand what we do, we need a new way of doing that. So we're looking at technology to do that automatically using AI. So recently at Ipswich, we've put mics around the pitch and we basically are using AI to auto detect where the ball is, and it listens to kicks for the ball and it comes back and it says the player's there, and you turn up the volume at there, and it all happens automatically in the background. And what that's now highlighting to us is we now don't need that operator, because when we talk about innovation, there's a couple of things from my perspective. Is it's not all about that light bulb moment. It's about necessarily potentially doing more with the same of what you've got. So that's one of the areas we've necessarily been looking into. And the tests are positive. So it necessarily, that then fills us with confidence to go and say, you know what, we can do this on other sports and other areas. So all of a sudden, from having what we have at this moment in time is single mic on camera one, we've now got potential to have mics all around the pitch and have that capability for very little additional cost. And we're getting to a stage where at some stage I want to go to every federation and say, okay, you want this feature, it costs you that per match. You want this feature, it costs you that per match. And we're going to really see potentially what the fans want. Because a lot of what we've been doing for decades is worrying about what the broadcaster wants, but at some stage we might actually bypass the broadcaster and go straight to the fans. So if all of a sudden the fan is paying for a subscription and every penny counts, you have to really work out, is that super slow-mo massively important to you? Because we necessarily need to work out that there's an element that adds an extra 10 pence onto your subscription. And price might be a huge factor in that. So it's just being aware of what you can do. You know, if you went to big federations with mobile phones and said, we're going to use these cameras to record your content, they're probably not interested, and quite rightly. But if you go to the lower tiers and say, we can now necessarily, you know, have the mobile phone walking one way as you walk down the tunnel, and then taking it and unplugging it and putting it the other way, you've got two cameras there. And it makes you look like you have spent an absolute fortune moving your production forward.
Do you feel there's been a sense of almost that COVID has brought forward some of the experimentation and some of the tech advances that you were probably going to work on, but you've actually done it faster because of COVID to begin with, and also the lack of talent that we've all been talking about at the moment?
It was interesting because from a technical point of view, I think we all sat there and we knew before COVID that this could work. But when COVID happened, we was all looking at each other going, let's hope this bloody works, because you know we've been sitting there for ages saying, yeah, this works. And I think what's massively sped up is that production's buying. We don't have to necessarily convince them that we can do this remotely now. Where the remote location is now probably more interesting to me, because I'm not a fan of the remote location being in someone's home for something that's potentially live, because all of a sudden, you know, you've got your EVS operator sitting at home and all of a sudden these kids start streaming Netflix. I can't take that risk. So when I talk about remote, I talk about the facility is the remote location, whether that be one facility, two facilities, three facilities. You might have your EVS op in a facility in Liverpool, and you might have your sound operator in London. So you've got the potential there to do, that's what I see as remote, not necessarily in someone's house. But that doesn't mean it's horses for courses. Because again, if we're doing commentary, having alternative commentators, if we're doing an event and you've got some talent that's in America, you've now got the capability of giving them a webcam, and all of a sudden you've got something that you didn't have before that it's very similar to what the City Group were talking about. making it easy for people to necessarily raise your production values. So the fact that they've got their talent right on their doorstep means that they can use them, and then you can get their buy-in. So that's where it also gives you huge potential.
John, when you're talking about the virtual studio and how impressive it looked, is there ever a danger with that sort of tech? I mean, it's a playground, isn't it, for tech people? Let's face it. Is there a danger that you end up going too far? It becomes cliched, or you actually overwhelm the viewer with what you're actually putting out there? And is that something you've looked at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I say, I think when we first started it, and we made a lot of mistakes. I think part to do with that was that, first, when do you stop creatively? You have to stop. You have to kind of draw a line on things. Obviously, as I say, I think the thing is, as I say, there's different. It's the viewing, for different events as well. I mean, so for the Winter Olympics, for example, we did have a bit of fun with it, because and also the traction we got off that as well is that obviously we had people coming into the studio doing kind of as guests, snowboarders, ex-skiers. And they just loved it. And what they were doing is they were just kind of filming themselves with polar bears in the background, tweeting it out to kind of people. And it actually, so it kind of, went past just the broadcast. It was actually became a talking point, online and everything else. For example, Tokyo, we're not trying to fool the viewer. We're not trying to, I think, but for the Tokyo Olympics, for example, we did, and I was, which we used obviously Unreal Engine. It was Brainstorm as well, and Move, who were our graphics player at the time, for that event. It was actually, we were getting loads of tweets coming in going, I thought the BBC weren't in Tokyo, and we were actually looking to think, surely they must realise not. But actually, I think it shows that just sometimes people sit there and they kind of they're not interested in the kind of the presentation and what's going on around them. But some people obviously taking if there's something that's engaging, then it becomes a talking point for them as well. I think also as well, we've done, we kind of, if we're doing a virtual studio, we might do a kind of behind the scenes piece, like Dan Walker did one for the Tokyo, put it online. I think, for the youth audience, like with younger audiences, which we're trying to attract as well, showing them that we're doing our broadcasting using gaming engine, the do Fortnite, it kind of all of that, it's a part of a melting pot. But in terms of, I think there's definitely pitfalls with it, and I would say, knowing when to stop, and also, just realizing costs as well. It's, it is virtual. You can kind of do what you like to a certain extent, but at the same time, there's a cost to it, especially to the creative side of it. Someone's asked here, true or false, you can always spot a virtual set because the camera is constantly moving about. Yes. But I mean, on singles, we don't. But you do obviously directors like to show it off a little bit, I think, at times as well. But it's a good point. How long did it take you to develop the skills and the talent required to create that virtual studio space? Right, okay. So there's a few things to this. I think so. We have a small team, BBC Sport, a creative team. So we can't. So our internal team can't obviously kind of, when we do a major event, we do rely on our kind of external suppliers. So we have, we have Olsenelli, we have Move, and obviously, you've got your kind of your technology vendors, like your kind of, Brainstorm, VizRT, Ross, etc. And we rely on those fairly heavily for the bigger events. So in terms of skill set, yes, we have brought gaming engine skill sets into the team, but we still have to be careful. We still have to be mindful about what that can scale to. I think as well, it's just, again, the gaming engine design side of it is so big now. I think you've got great designers coming into the broadcast, young designers from a games end, but we've noticed that they're quite quickly kind of taken away because the gaming industry is huge. Yeah. So there's that side of it as well, that you can train them up in broadcast, but then you obviously there is a potential that you do lose them quite quickly as well. So it is a challenge because it's a different workflow.
Brian, this is a good question. I was going to ask it anyway. What's the one magic bit of kit that you would love to get hold of in the future that maybe doesn't exist but is realistic in the future?
I think the thing that I think is going to hit us all hard is the sustainability angle. So there's an element to say that having kit that is more economic and so less power hungry, because we're getting to a stage now when we're looking at capex purchases, there's another column to the next of it saying how much power that's going to use over the next 3 to 5 years. So I think if I had my ideal wish, I'd be hiring pieces of kit that used hardly any power. How practical that is another argument, and then there's things like that. So again, recently, and again we're going to see it soon, is that the diesel generators necessarily can be replaced now with electric ones, and so you take the battery away, charge it up overnight, and then you bring it into your OB, your set, your studio, and then it sits there quietly in the corner, does the job for that period of time. So it's the sustainability angle that is probably the most important to me.
You were talking about remote production a little earlier. Someone said, as things do go more remote, how do you continue to attract the best crew when people previously worked in TV, partly because they actually enjoyed that culture, the travel, the OB culture that we
It's a tough one because
about.
It depends on who you are and where you are in your stage of your career. Because so there's examples of where people actually, rather than traveling around the world, they've got a family, they want to be home. So it's, for those sort of individuals, this is ideal for them. So you're getting to a stage where you can actually potentially encourage people who wouldn't have been able to travel around the world, and you're reaching a diverse female market who might have had a family and settled at home. You've got that potential to tap into. But I think my sort of problem is that the skill set's not there, and we can all sit there and go, oh, we need more staff, but we're all fighting for the same sort of people. And I feel like the only way to raise that is to blood them through your own system. So necessarily go young and try and get them in and get them interested and necessarily feed it through that way. Because I just don't think they're there, I think some of the industry, when Twitter's getting rid of all of their staff, we're thinking, oh yeah, that's great. They're all in the valley, they ain't gonna come to London to necessarily work. So it's like, let's be realistic on where we're gonna get these people from. So youth is probably the best way to go, from my perspective anyway.
On a similar theme, is there any thought of creating smaller remote hubs in a variety of locations around the UK, around the country, so that crew based outside the main hubs don't have to travel? Is that
it's definitely on the horizon, because when I look at it, and I probably work with EFL more, every one of those stadiums is a facility. Yeah. How crazy we want to go is down to necessarily budget, but if we can work out actually we can have a facility very similar to what the government did with moving the BBC to Manchester. If you build it, they will come. And so if that's a reason why we can't get staff because we're based in London, we need people to come to London, and then we've got a facility somewhere else in the UK, it gives opportunity to other people who might not necessarily been able to make that push and that move.
Question to both of you. I mean, it's a time for predictions, really. 2023, is there stuff coming up in 2023 either you can tell us about or that you would like to be able to do in 2023? What can we look forward to?
You can go first.
Good luck.
Well, I'm kind of hoping for a quieter year than last one, to be honest. I mean, obviously, yeah, the year we just had was crazy because of obviously all the delayed events and everything, and we obviously threw a lot into it, and finishing with this World Cup. I mean, so in terms of events specific, obviously we regard next year as one of our quieter years in terms of major events. But, look, I mean, as I say, we've been working in the virtual studios arena now for a few years, and we obviously still want to keep pushing that. Obviously, things like the LED volume. I mean, because green screen, it's great, but it's still a nightmare. It's still not easy. It's still kind of a lot of work getting it right and getting the lighting right and everything. And I think I would like to kind of try and get into an LED volume project. Obviously, costs come into that and everything else. But I think that would possibly be the next stage. I mean, when I say next stage, it's there now. But I think in terms of it being taken on, for people to use as virtual production rather than the green screen, I think you might see a bit more of a curve in that, I would say. So it's LED volume, that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think my problem is, again, you've probably heard 5 or 10 ideas today. There's an element of the gamble is which ideas do you focus your time in? Because there's 60, 70 ideas that you could probably just rattle off, and it's just, you don't want to miss out, so you've got to be careful on which ones you invest in. But do I do 20 of them, half-assed, or do I do necessarily 3 or 4 and put real effort into really make it happen? So I think there's potential, you know, again, when the gentleman earlier was talking about NFTs, you know, why don't we start recording the crowd and take action shots of a gentleman celebrating with his child and then selling that as an NFT? The options are just endless on what's capable. And I've probably never been as excited as I am right at this moment in time going into the future, because, you know, when you was watching some of the classic motoring earlier, that's how Formula One's shot now. I know it massively with graphics, but we're at a stage now where most, and again, unless you invent the sport, most live games are being covered now. So we really need an innovation now to make more of what we've got. And I think we're going to start attacking archives a lot more. You know, you've got these channels you can roll up. The potential is just endless.
One final thought from both of you. From the time when you began your career, what are you doing now that you could never have dreamt of, that you didn't think was possible when you actually, you know, first got into this crazy business?
I went first last time.
Well, when I started at IMG, we was doing 1 game a weekend. I think this season we'll be doing over 2,000. So if someone would have said that to me 20 years ago, I'd have said no way. It's just impossible. So that's where we've come from and where we've gone to. God knows what we'll be doing in the next 10, 15 years, but geez.
John, any thoughts?
Yeah, it sounds a little bit bland based on what I'm saying now, because obviously, I mean, branding is branding. I've been obviously in the creative side of it for everything, but obviously I didn't think that we'd be using kind of, you know, well, I'm saying using game and engine technology to kind of drive our broadcast studios when I got into the industry. I mean, I know even, you know, obviously even Xboxes and everything went around them, but I didn't think that's technology we'd be using so much now in broadcast. So that would be the one thing.
We've come a long way.
Yeah.
John, Brian, many thanks. Thank my panel.
Thank you.